Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an impressive and chilling story. Let's meet Cassius Vale, a man who was declared clinically dead for 1 hour and 45 minutes and had an unbelievable experience in heaven. What he saw on the other side challenges everything we've ever heard about eternity and reveals a truth that may be hidden from us all. Get ready for a story full of mystery, shocking revelations, and a return that no one can explain. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this transformative journey. My name is Cassius Vale, and by May 2006, I was sure I understood how life worked. I grew up in Charleston in South Carolina, a city rooted in tradition and order. For me, it all came down to cause and effect. In juvenile court, where I worked as a probation supervisor, I firmly believed that choices defined destinies. Some of the young people under my supervision were capable of starting over, but others, well, I thought they were doomed by their own decisions. Life had never given me space for spirituality. I was not an avowed atheist, but neither did I see the point in religion or any idea of life after death. For me, the world was a chessboard where everyone needed to know their moves. If you made mistakes, you would face the consequences, and I dealt with consequences daily. That morning, like every other morning, my routine started early. The strong black coffee, the sound of the newspaper being folded on the table, and the distant sounds of the city waking up. On the way to court, already in the car, I mentally reviewed the pending cases of the day. My phone vibrated and I saw the name of one of the social workers flashing on the screen. "Vale, we have a problem with Jasper Calloway." The officer's voice sounded tired. I sighed, already imagining it. Jasper was a 16-year-old boy who I had been following for months. He had a talent for getting into trouble, and from the looks of it, he was about to make his life even more complicated. What did he do now? He left school without permission and was seen with a gang. I pinched the bridge of my nose, already feeling tired before I even reached the courthouse. "Let me know if he's detained," I replied, hanging up the phone. I spent the rest of the morning dealing with meetings, hearings, and reports, barely having time for lunch. Until then, there was nothing different about the day. But, around 3 in the afternoon, everything changed. It started with discomfort on the right side of the abdomen, a sharp stab like a knife twisting my insides. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to poor diet and stress, but the pain increased. In less than an hour, it turned into something unbearable. A cold sweat covered my forehead. My hands started to shake. "Vale, are you okay?" A colleague looked at me with concern as I leaned on the table, trying to catch my breath. "I just need a minute." But it wasn't just a minute. The pain didn't go away. The room around me spun. My heart raced uncontrollably and a ringing filled my ears. I was going to faint. I tried to get up, but my legs gave out and I felt the ground come towards me. Before it went out, I only heard muffled screams around me. That's how it all started. I woke up on a stretcher being pushed down a bright white hallway. The sound of the wheels turning on the polished floor mixed with the hurried voices of the doctors around me. The strong smell of disinfectant burned my nostrils. I tried to open my eyes completely, but my eyelids felt like lead. My body, an exhausted heap of bones and flesh, protested with every slightest movement. Pressure dropping, irregular heart rate. A female voice echoed above me. I wanted to speak, wanted to ask what was going on, but my throat felt sealed. "Renal grave. Sepsis. We need to stabilize him," another male voice said, and I felt a prick in the vein in my arm. Sepsis. The word floated through my confused mind, but the answer came quickly. I knew what it was: an infection taking over the body, causing organs to fail. Even though I don't want to admit it, I knew I was dying. Everything around was oscillating between consciousness and oblivion. Old memories came and went like flashes in a disorganized movie. The smell of wet earth in my father's backyard after the rain. The sound of waves crashing on Folly Beach. My mother's stern look when I came home late. Time became elastic. Then, suddenly, the pain is gone. Everything stopped. The medical team's frenzy stopped. The sound from the monitors disappeared. The metallic cold of the stretcher against my skin evaporated. An absolute silence enveloped me. And then I realized I wasn't there anymore. I looked around me and, to my shock, I saw my own body lying on the operating table. Tubes were connected to me. My skin was gray, without any sign of life. The doctors had given up. One of them, a man in a white coat with deep wrinkles around his eyes, looked at Dr. Meredith Langley, who held a clipboard in a shaking hand. "There is nothing more to be done." She hesitated for a moment and, with a tired sigh, bowed her head. Time of death, 11:42 p.m. I watched as she raised her pen to sign the document. I should feel scared. I should have been panicking. But instead, I felt a peace I had never experienced before, a feeling of freedom, of lightness, as if I had been taken out of a prison without realizing I was there. When I looked up, I saw something that made me forget about the hospital completely. A veil of light, an opening in space, called to me, and without hesitation, I went to her. The light was not just a distant glow. It was alive, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It pulsed like an immense heart, calling me without words, just with its irresistible presence. I knew I didn't need to walk to her. I was pulled, absorbed, as if I belonged there forever. I left the hospital behind, climbing in a dizzying motion. First I passed through the floors as if they were made of fog, then the ceiling, and then I found myself flying over Charleston. The city lights shone below. Cars followed their paths without knowing that, for me, that world had ended. But I didn't stop there. I continued climbing. The Earth's atmosphere was left behind. The stars around me seemed closer, vibrating in intense colors that I had never seen before. It was as if I were crossing unknown dimensions, going beyond what any human being could imagine. Time and space no longer make sense. I didn't know if it lasted seconds or an eternity. And then I saw it. An opening, like an immense window floating in the middle of the cosmos, shone in front of me. But it wasn't just a window, it was a portal. On the other side, there was another world, a completely different reality, and I felt like I needed to cross it. The strangest thing was that I didn't hesitate. If he were alive, he would have questioned, tried to understand, but there, everything seemed natural. The light called me like a house would call a distant child, and then effortlessly, I passed the threshold. As soon as I crossed, I was overcome by a sense of belonging so intense that tears welled up in my eyes. It was as if every particle of my being knew that this place was my true home. The environment around me was indescribable. The colors had a life of their own. The air vibrated with something that felt like music, and even the ground beneath my feet seemed to radiate love. There was no sun, but everything was bathed in a pure, golden light, a light that enveloped me without burning, just filling me with peace and something more, with joy. It was like that world was happy that I was there. That's when I realized that I wasn't alone. Something or someone was waiting for me ahead, and my soul knew, without a doubt, who it was. The ground beneath my feet was like nothing I had ever experienced. He was not made of stone or earth. It was alive. It pulsed in an almost imperceptible rhythm, as if it were breathing along with me. The light did not come from a sun above, but from everything around me, as if every particle of that place emanated its own glow. The sky was different. It was not just blue, but filled with fluid, translucent colors, as if painted by invisible hands that never stopped creating. The horizon stretched infinitely, without barriers, without limits, without fear. And then, I felt it, a presence. I knew, before I even saw her, that someone was there waiting for me. Not an ordinary presence, not just any spirit. Was he? My steps took me forward, without me even thinking about walking. It was as if my own desire to find him was enough to move me. I didn't control my body, but I didn't care either. I crossed an area full of tall, thin trees, whose leaves fluttered around me in a way that didn't seem to be caused by the wind. They leaned, bowed gently as I passed. That's when I realized something impressive. That place recognized me. Nothing there was inanimate. Everything was vivo. Everything was conscious. It was as if every particle of that world knew I had arrived. As I left the trail, I saw a large field open up in front of me. In the center there was somebody standing, surrounded by a crowd of glowing beings and indistinct figures. They were all facing him, silent, reverent. I knew who he was, and as soon as I saw him I fell to my knees. Not because someone told me to, not because I felt obligated, but why there was no other possible reaction. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and replaced with pure light. His presence was greater than anything the human mind could comprehend. It wasn't just Can. It wasn't just majesty, era, love. And he looked at me, I couldn't lift my eyes to meet his. I couldn't even breathe, but somehow I knew. He knew me. And then, something impossible happened. You felt that he saw me as if I had never made a single mistake in my entire existence. Every failure, every moment of doubt, every wrong thing I had ever done did not exist there. I cried. I cried like I never cried before, and for the first time, I understood what it meant be completely accepted. It was then that he spoke, and your voice changed everything. His voice was not like any other. It wasn't sound. It wasn't noise. She filled everything around me, as if the air itself were speaking. I felt each word vibrating within me, resonating in my being in a way that no human language could translate. It's not your time yet. The impact of those words hit me like a wave. My chest tightened, and my mind tried to process. It's not my time. What do you mean? I didn't want to go back. You couldn't to go back. There, everything made sense. Peace, love, belonging. What could there be in the world of the living that could offer me anything even close to that? I raised my head for the first time and tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. There was no need. He already knew how I felt. Without me saying a single word, I received a direct answer, not in sentences, but in a wave of understanding that enveloped me completely. I had a mission. Suddenly, a flow of knowledge began to flood my mind, as if something was being downloaded directly into my soul. I saw images. I understood truths that had never crossed my thoughts before. I understood things about life, about eternity, about every choice we make. It was like every question I had ever asked was being answered at the same time. And among these responses, there was something that took my breath away. His love was not conditional. It hit me hard, because and until that moment, I believed what many believe, that there is a line drawn between those who are worthy and those who are not, that there is a code, a human criterion that separates the good from the bad. Masali, I realized that everything I knew about this was wrong. It wasn't about merits. It wasn't about doctrines. It was about love. What he showed me next left me stunned. I saw the world in a way I had never seen before. I saw people, millions of them. I saw your pains, your fears, your joys. Saw the weight that each one carried within themselves, the invisible battles that no one else saw. I saw people that I, in life, would have judged as lost, being enveloped by his light. I saw that no one was beyond his reach. I didn't know if I was crying or just feeling my soul crumble under the weight of that revelation. And then, he spoke again, times. But I didn't want. I knew what that meant. It meant returning to a world limited, a world gray compared to this one. It meant returning to suffering, fear, uncertainty. My mind fought the idea, but something inside me knew that I would have to obey. I wasn't ready, but that choice wasn't mine. I wanted to beg. I wanted to say, "Don't send me back." But words were not necessary. He already knew. Even so, there was no negotiation. Times, the order echoed inside me, and I knew I couldn't defy it. But something stopped me. When I tried to obey, I felt resistance. Something was wrong. I looked back to the place where I was supposed to cross back into the world of the living, but there was nothing there. My form, my consciousness, everything still belonged to that realm. I knew I had to go, but I couldn't. A hesitation filled the space around me. It wasn't a mistake. It was an opportunity. I could still explore. If my departure was being postponed, then maybe there was more for me to see, to understand. My attention strayed to the horizon. There, the mountains seemed to move, undulating, as if they were alive. The rivers shone, reflecting colors that do not exist on Earth. I wanted to understand more about that place, and as soon as I wished, moves me. It was instantaneous. The mere thought of exploring transported me far away. I found myself facing an impossible vastness. Immense mountains rose, but they were not made of stone like those on Earth. They were translucent, as if they were made of solid light. Each of them seemed to sing, emit vibrations, as if they were alive. I came close to a river whose waters were not just liquid. They looked like flowing energy. Every drop radiated love and peace. The sound was not that of a current, but something like a distant chorus, an eternal melody. I could feel that that place was connected to me in a way that the physical world never was. But what surprised me even more was what I saw next. Had creatures there. Some were familiar, Bright birds streaked across the sky, their songs blending with the ambient melody. But others, they were indescribable. There were life forms that never existed on Earth, and yet they weren't strange to me. It was as if, somehow, I had always known they existed, and in that instant, a realization came over me. The universe was bigger than I ever imagined. Creation was infinite. In that place, there was no fear, no separation, no judgment. Everything was connected. Everything was part of a single purpose. And then, I heard the voice again. It's not your time. This time there was no reluctance in me. I understood. I needed to go back. But something told me that there was still more for me to see. My desire to remain there still burned within me, but something greater was beginning to form in my understanding. If I was still there, it was because there was more to learn. The call to return had been given twice, but I hadn't yet crossed the threshold back into life, and that meant there was still something I should see. This time, I wasn't pulled. I chose to continue exploring. I moved again effortlessly, being guided not by a physical path, but by my own thoughts. If I wanted to see something, my being moved there instantly. The landscape has changed. I left behind the mountains of light and vibrant rivers and was taken to another place. Before me there was an immense golden valley, full of shapes that seemed human, but radiated an indescribable energy. They were gathered in groups, and their presence shone like stars, pulsing in different shades of light. Each of them had a unique essence, as if their light was a reflection of who they were in life. And then, in their midst, I saw familiar faces. My heart, or whatever I was in that state, seemed to stop. There, in front of me, was my father. August Vale had died 20 years earlier. I still remembered the day I last saw him, lying in a hospital bed, his breathing shallow and his eyes tired. I remembered holding his hand, feeling his cold skin. But now, there before me, he didn't look fragile. He was alive, more alive than he had ever been. His body no longer bore the signs of time, illness, or suffering. He radiated light and peace, as if all the weight of existence had been lifted. Good. My voice didn't come out as a sound, but as a thought that he heard immediately. He smiled, and his presence enveloped me with a love so deep that tears burned in my eyes. My son, I knew you would come. I wanted to run to him, hug him, tell him I missed him. But before I could react, I saw that he was not alone. Behind him, there was a crowd. I recognized some uncles, grandparents, relatives that I only knew from old photos, but there were also people I would never have imagined meeting there. It was then that my father looked at me seriously and said something that made me freeze. Cassius, what you believe about salvation is wrong. My mind spun, like this. What did he mean? Before I could ask, he showed me. In an instant, a stream of knowledge was transmitted to me, and I understood something that defied everything I thought I knew. His love was much greater than any human being could imagine. There, in front of me, were people who, in life, I would never have considered as deserving of a place like this. People I would judge as condemned, as souls without redemption. But they were here, surrounded by the same light, by the same love. It was then that I understood the truth that changed everything. Divine criteria are not the same as those of humans, and in that instant, my entire vision of right and wrong, of judgment and destiny, collapsed. My father still looked at me with a serene but firm expression. He knew that what he had just shown me shook everything I believed. My mind tried to process, but it was like I was trying to hold water in my hands. I always thought eternity was reserved for only a few, that there were rules, clear limits, a strict criteria for who deserved to be there or not. But the reality was very different. Before me were people who, in life, I would have considered lost. People who I believed would never have a chance. A tall man with stern features smiled at me. He was wearing something similar to a robe of light, but even without saying a word, I knew who he was. It was an old coworker, someone who was never religious, someone who died without ever professing any belief. Beside him, a woman with dark skin and long hair shone with golden light. I recognized your face from the court hearings. She was a former offender, someone who spent years involved in crimes, someone I thought had no hope of redemption. Maz Ali, she was surrounded by the same grace, the same love that surrounded everyone. But how? My question was not asked with words, but with thought. And my father understood. You always thought that salvation was about merits, about who did right and who did wrong, but that's not how it works. His words sounded like a crushing revelation. So it doesn't matter what anyone does. What does one choose? He smiled slightly and shook his head. It matters. Yes. Every choice matters. Every life has consequences. But his love is greater than people's mistakes. Grace is offered to all, even those the world would deem unworthy. I felt something inside me breaking, something I had carried for a long time without realizing it. My sense of justice, my belief in punishment and reward, all of this crumbled before the truth I saw. My father continued, "You judged people as if you knew who deserved to be here. But look around, son. Look at who's here. Don't you understand?" I looked again. The faces around me radiated love. There was no resentment. There was no pain. There was nothing that resembled suffering or injustice. There was only acceptance, only light. My mind tried to look for arguments, reasons, explanations for what I saw, but inside me, I already knew. It was true. My voice shook as I asked, "What about those I always believed would be here?" "They are." My father sighed. "Some, yes. But others." He hesitated, and I felt a tightness in my chest. "They refused the light." The phrase hit me like a blow. Did they refuse? But who would refuse something like that? He looked at me with a look full of understanding and said, "Those who chose to walk away, the light never rejected them. They just couldn't accept it." I wanted to understand better. I wanted to ask more, but at that moment, the voice returned. "Cassius, it's time to go back." And this time, I knew there would be no other chance to refuse. My father held my shoulders and smiled. "Bring as many of our family with you as possible." And then, the world began to disappear. The light was moving away. The sound of the melody around me weakened. I felt like I was being pulled away from that love, that peace, that truth that had transformed everything within me. And in an instant, I was falling back. The sensation of falling was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just a physical movement. It was as if my soul was being pulled through invisible layers of existence. With each instant, the heat of the divine light diminished, and the consciousness of the physical world began to impose itself upon me again. I fought it. I didn't want to leave there. Why would I return to a world full of pain, limitations, fear? I wanted to stay. I needed to stay. But there was no longer a choice. This time, I couldn't resist. The world around me began to turn into shadows. The vibrant colors of that celestial kingdom were being replaced by cold and the emptiness of matter. My vision blurred, and then everything went black. And in an instant, I felt pain. The pain of my dead body. My chest felt like it was being crushed by an unbearable weight. My veins burned like liquid fire coursing through them. A deafening sound invaded my mind. The sound of voices, of machines, of chaos. And then, a beep. Then another, and another. My lungs filled with air in a violent jolt, as if they had been jolted out of inertia. My mouth opened in a silent scream, while my heart, which until then had been still, knocked again. Everything happened at the same time. The doctors screamed. A scalpel fell to the floor, echoing in the stunned silence of the room. And the look of Dr. Meredith Langley, who was still holding my clipboard with the death certificate, stared at me with pure shock. My God, he's back. My eyes opened completely, but my mind was still somewhere else. The light, where was the light? I wanted to scream, I wanted to ask, I wanted to understand why wasn't I there anymore. But my lips didn't move. My body felt heavy, stiff, as if it had been pulled from a grave. Doctors hustled, connecting wires, injecting substances, monitoring signals. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Nobody could. I had been declared dead almost 2 hours ago. Nobody comes back after that, but I came back. And in the back of my mind, a single sentence echoed like an order I could never ignore. Bring as many of your family with you as possible. It was then that I knew. My life would never be the same again. In the days following my return, the hospital became a place of amazement and disbelief. I was a dead man who had come back. Doctors were trying to find an explanation. There wasn't. My record showed that I had been declared clinically dead for 1 hour and 45 minutes. That was impossible. There were no documented cases of someone coming back to life after so long without brain damage, without after effects. But there I was, lucid, alive, changed. And this change was felt by everyone around me. Dr. Langley came to see me as soon as I had strength to speak. She approached the bed slowly, as if she were facing something supernatural. "Cassius, do you know what happened?" I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what to say. "Yes, I died." She swallowed, waiting for me to say more. And I did. I told everything. The light, the other world, his presence. I told about my father, about the truth that was revealed to me, about the love that encompassed everything. She listened without blinking, without interrupting. When I finished, I saw tears gathering in her eyes. "And now, what are you going to do with it?" That question echoed inside me long after she left the room. I knew the answer. I needed to tell the world. The first change happened within me. I was no longer the same man. My outlook on life has completely changed. I no longer feared death. I knew it wasn't an end, just a passage. And most of all, I knew that his love was much greater than any of us could imagine. The young people I supervised in juvenile court were not just delinquents serving time. They were valuable souls, beings destined for something greater. Every person I crossed paths with, every life I touched, took on a new meaning for me. Time was no longer something I could waste. I had a mission. My family, my friends, even those who have never known the love of God, they all needed to know. So I started talking. At first, people didn't believe it. Some doctors tried to attribute my experience to hallucinations, to residual brain activity. But something was undeniable. I had come back different, and this change was too real to ignore. As I told my story, I saw something amazing happen. People listened, even the most skeptical, Kauron, even those who laughed at the idea of life after death. There was something in my voice, in the way I told it, that made them stop and listen, because I didn't talk about religion. I spoke of the truth, and the truth was that we are not alone. Life goes on. Love never ends. And one day, we will all meet again. This certainty stays with me to this day. And one day, when my time truly comes, I know I'll be coming home. This time, to stay. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.